Do you know who Mo Sider's agent is?
No.
It's Claude Lemieux.
I think I did know that.
So yeah, Mo Sider's agent is the most hated man in trade. Although actually, I'll say this: I think Patrick Waugh is hated more than Claude Lemieux.
You think so?
Because Claude, the hit was bad and the shit talking after was bad, but I felt like Waugh was really public enemy number one for a while, especially because um,
I mean, he is the goalie.
Claude he was there was the famous Statue of Liberty goal, who in 2002 that honestly kind of ended his career. Uh, I'm trying to remember. Because Claude was not on. Let's see. When did he go to the Avalanche? Or when did he leave the Avalanche? Yeah, he was. Because you got to remember, Claude was traded back to New Jersey in 1999. Um, so that era of the 3 years from 99 to 2002, the rivalry kept going without Lemieux being a part of it. Like Foot was still
Right.
there, and obviously Waugh was still there, and it kept going. And the Avs went on to win another cup in 2001, and then the Wings won in 02.
Well, and the Wings, like and I get it about, and I know that we're gonna segue into the
Unrivaled.
unrivaled thing and we're gonna talk about that a little bit. But the most interesting thing to me, I think, is that so like '02 was like the first Stanley Cup run or championship run in general in sports that I was ever attached to, right? Like
Right.
I had a big Hasek fan. I had an Yzerman jersey at the time. But Hasek was really my favorite player. Yeah, when you're 7, you can't really decide which players' jerseys you get to buy. But but I loved Hasek. He made me want to play goalie for my own hockey team, which I was terrible at and allowed like 6 goals in the first period of my first game. Terrible time, but just that run, like I still think that as far as Detroit clutch performances go, I think that Hasek's performance in Game 6 of the '02 Conference Finals against the Avalanche is one of the best that has ever happened. Like I don't think that there's many. I mean, it's Maglio Ordonez '06 send to the World Series like on top, or
Yeah.
things
No,
like that.
and that kind of leads
Or
into
Darren McCarty's goal against the Flyers.
oh, dude, that was 90. That was
That was
90.
97.
Yeah, because
And
they swept the Flyers and they swept the Capitals in the
right,
back to
and
back.
but yeah, I think that, like, obviously the rivalry had, died down by then, but still it was
It was after that year because Waugh, and forgive me because like I don't know all these dates off the top of my head. I was, let's see, 4 when the
yeah,
rival in 2002.
right.
So a lot of this is secondhand knowledge for me. Like that's kind of like the Unrivaled thing. Like I watched the Russian 5 documentary, which also helped. I knew about the incident and the rivalry well before, but these documentaries definitely give it a cool new
Well, it
perspective
makes it
for me.
dramatic. Like I used to watch the 1997 Stanley Cup movie that the Red Wings had. It was like an hour long or something like that, and it was on VHS. And I remember watching it like all the time as a child, and so just yeah, I don't know,
And like
like that's how I
here's the
got
thing.
it.
I hate Patrick Waugh, but I also like respect him for being potentially uh one the greatest goalie in history.
I still think
If
it's
one
Hasek, but we're not gonna go there.
I mean, like listen, Brett, he's the only NHL player in history to win the Conn Smythe 3 times, only one to do so in 3 different decades, and the only one to do so with 2 different teams.
I
He's
might be partial, but it's
well, yeah.
still but I think that it's a big portion or a big reason why I think that Wah was so for so long, people thought that he was like unanimously the best or the greatest goaltender of all time
Yeah.
is partly between two factors, and I think it boils down to he was on more successful teams at the time. Like the Avalanche had won so many, putting him in a better position to succeed, whereas Hasek was on the Buffalo Sabres, who, by the way, when Hasek was on that team that won that had who got into the Stanley Cup Finals against the Stars in 1999. The Sabres did not belong there. Like they had no place being in that series, and yet they had gotten to Game 6.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's between that, and I also think that the fact that there were no real like European goalie style of play was like not very popular at the time. Like the whole butterfly thing that Hasek did, I think was very exciting. So that also kind of leads into maybe why some people would favor him over Wah, or whereas Wah was more of a stand up like traditional style of goaltender.
Yep. And with Wah, like, so in 0203 was like his last season with the Avalanche. They got knocked out in the first round against the Minnesota Wild. And obviously in 01, 02, that was the year that was the year the Wings won it, I believe. Who won the best of 7 against the Hurricanes? Yeah. So he wins it in 01, the 2001 season, and then the 01-02 team, the Wings get the best of him, and that kind of ended his career, if for the most part. Like that was like that Statue of Liberty goal, the one where he saves it, it's in his glove, and he does the showboat with it, and he flies out of his glove and rolls into his own net, and like those were things that they kind of didn't cover in the doc, in the Unrivaled doc. They kind of stopped after the Wings won the second cup in '98.
Right. Well, and I think it's part of that too was
other
weird
than, like,
for me.
They showed like the Osgood fight and that, but like those were in the regular season. They didn't show,
Well, they didn't really even touch on the '98 season. I mean, they did, but they didn't. They did,
well,
but
because
briefly.
The teams, other than a couple fights, because the one thing they did touch on was, I forget what it was, a regular season game, and Lemieux and McCarty are both sitting next to each other at the face-off, and they look at each other. And Lemieux you remember, he got his shit kicked in at fight night at the Joe.
Right.
He felt guilty because everyone was fighting for him in that, but meanwhile, he was off getting dragged to the locker room, and he wanted to throw down the fight with McCarty to show like, hey, I'm going to stand up for myself. I don't need my teammates to do it. I don't need other people getting hurt for my cause. Now, granted, McCarty still beat the shit out of him, but it was at least a respect thing, because Lemieux was notorious for, he would be an agitator, he would take cheap shots, and when someone actually tried to throw the gloves down, he would turtle and wouldn't want to fight. And in this case, he actually did, and it was kind of a point of like, I don't like the guy, I hate him, but I can at least respect what he did in that. But other than that, they didn't really touch on that season, and a big reason why is because Colorado got knocked out in the 90 in the
Yeah, they had, well, I think it was the Oilers that did that. And another
they
thing,
never met in the playoffs, so they didn't really touch on it. And they wanted to talk more about Vlad Konstantinov,
right?
Understandably, because that, by the way, that was great. It really got the waterworks going.
What's interesting is
just so cool for him to be there still.
To me, what's interesting, and the Vlady stuff was awesome, but what's interesting to me, I think more so than anything else, is that the documentary was so like pro Red Wings, and I mean, I guess for obvious reasons. Like I feel like a Red Wings fan might have enjoyed that more than say an Avalanche fan. Like, would you agree? Because it was, I mean, it was set up by McCarty.
The story is so heartbreaking when you think about it, because it's
from a
like
Red Wings perspective.
it can be heartbreaking if you're romantic about sports, which I
Yeah.
think a lot of sports fans are. People are always make the joke, how can you not be romantic about baseball when all the cool shit happens in it? You know, and it's kind of the same thing with any sport. And a big thing that happened was, you got to remember that 97 cup was the first cup the Wings had won in 40 years.
Well, that's
They
yeah,
after the
exactly.
dead wing era and being an incompetent hockey organization, they finally win one. And literally 6 days after the fact, they're out having a good time on the golf course playing golf, and they call a limo because they're drinking all day.
Right.
It's not like it wasn't like he did it to himself. They had a limousine driver, and the limousine driver happened to be a guy who didn't have his license, had was under the influence, and really I have no idea how he was the one that ended up being their limousine driver, and it ends up being just a truly awful story, an awful situation. And then obviously the next year they come back, the storybook, they win the cup, they bring Vlady out in the ice in Washington, which big shout out to Washington fans back then, because it sounded like they were in Detroit with how loud they cheered when they introduced Vladdy over the loudspeaker that he was there, and the place like erupted. Because if you're a hockey fan and you realize that happens, it's like it's bigger than sports. And you know Joe Sakic, who is the current Avalanche GM and was a player back in that era. Um, Again, I kind of hate everyone from that era, right? Because the rivalry is the rivalry, but I respected him for saying it's the one time you could root for the Red Wings because it was just such a classy thing that they did, and how they and getting to let Vladdy have that moment. And like I said, it was a really well done documentary, especially if you did watch the extended version and you got to see more of the backstory about how the Red Wings were too soft. They got bullied out of the finals in '96, and then or in '95, and then in '96, obviously, kind of the same thing with Colorado. And then they come back and they become, the whole fight night incident. Really good on the preemptive stuff in the extended version. I just do wish they had talked about um, the rivalry a little bit more into 2002, but I also kind of get it because one time you do have a time constraint, and I get you got Vlad to be a part of it. You gotta give him the time, and I get wanting to kind of end the on him and him winning it in '98. So like I said, I would have liked something else a little bit more. I think the Russian 5 documentary is like the nice one that kind of wraps up after '98. Um, I would have liked to seen this one talk all the way through the rivalry, but I also understand. I'm not like losing sleep over it. It was still very well done and very cool, especially if you're a younger Wings fan that either was barely able to remember it or really wasn't alive or old enough to remember the rivalry. Definitely a cool experience. But at this point, I'm done talking about past accomplishments for these teams, and I would very much like to get to the point where we can talk about these teams in the future being good. And we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing is, well, and obviously we brought this up before, but the Red Wings have never not won the Stanley Cup the year after the Avalanche have won. So we're not saying it's gonna
I'm
happen or anything, but it obviously it's looking good as far as if we set precedent.